Book 2, Chapter 2, The First Quest of Sir Lancelot. On the day before the Feast of Pentecost, 1 year after Merlin had made the Round Table, King Arthur, with some of his knights, rode out early from Camelot to hunt in the forest. Before they had ridden far, they met with a wounded knight, carried in a litter by 4 squires. The knight groaned like one in great pain, and as he turned upon the litter, all might see the broken blade of a sword standing out from a grim wound in his head. "Now tell me," said King Arthur, "wherefore you rest thus in the litter, and do you seek for a leech or a priest?" "Sir," groaned the knight, "I seek for neither, but I would come to the court of King Arthur, for only there may I be cured of my grievous hurt. For there I shall find the best knight of all Logres, and he shall be known by his first deed of knighthood, which shall be the healing of my wound with the touch of his hand, and the drawing forth of the steel. And such a healing shall be his last deed also, after many years, before the night falls upon Logres. These things the Lady Nimue of Avalon revealed to me." Then Arthur bade all his knights try, each in his turn, to heal the wound, but none of them might do it. No, not even Gawain, the best knight among them. "Tomorrow is the Feast of Pentecost," said King Arthur, "and on that day all my knights of the Round Table shall be met together as upon their oath. Then shall we seek for this knight, but I know not who it shall be if my nephew Gawain were not worthy." Then the wounded knight was carried into the great hall at Camelot, and well tended there all that day, while Arthur rode on into the forest. And on the morrow all the knights were met together at the feast, each in his place at the Round Table, but some places stood empty. For there were knights who had fallen in battle since the year before. When those who came had told each of his deeds during the year, and sworn himself afresh into the high order of knighthood, they laid hands in turn upon the wounded man in the litter, but none might heal him. "Now," said King Arthur, "this is a great wonder, and I know not if greater still there is to be ere we eat our meal this day." Hardly had he spoken these words, when there came a trumpet call from without, and into the hall rode Nimue, the Lady of the Lake of Avalon, she who had laid Merlin to his long rest. And behind her came 3 young men, squires in white array, very goodly to behold. But the first of them was so fine a man, golden-haired, broad of shoulder, open of face, that all were silent to see the goodliness of him. And Queen Guinevere sighed, and the colour fled from her face for very wonder. "I come to you, my lord king," said the Lady Nimue, "to bring this man, my foster-child, the son of King Pant of Gwynedd. I come to bring you Merlin's last behest, for ere he went living into the earth, he sought out this youth and bade him to come to your court upon this feast of Pentecost, and ask you to bestow upon him the high order of knighthood. My lord Arthur, this is Lancelot, called of the Lake, for that he dwelt with me in my fairy dwelling many years, when the wicked King Ryon ravaged his land of Gwynedd. Merlin has spoken his name to you, and see, that name grows in letters of gold upon the empty siege on the right hand of the Siege Perilous." Then Arthur rose and came down into the hall. Drawing the sword Excalibur, he laid it upon Lancelot's shoulders and bade him rise a knight. And as there were 3 places still empty at the Round Table, where knights now dead had sat, he knighted also the 2 squires who came with Lancelot, his half-brother Hector, and his cousin Lionel. Now all this while the wounded knight had lain in his litter near the fire, and when Arthur had returned to his seat, the Lady Nimue took Lancelot and led him over to the place. Then Lancelot stretched forth his hand and drew out the sword blade very gently, and when it was out, the wound closed up, and all pain forsook the knight, so that he rose from his litter, and was given the last place at the table. Then the Lady Nimue curtsied low to King Arthur, kissed Sir Lancelot very tenderly on the brow, and went swiftly from the hall. But some of the older knights thought it wrong that this boy Lancelot should win such honour and be set beside the Siege Perilous, when he had done no deed and followed no quest, and they murmured unkind things about Lancelot and about Sir Hector and Sir Lionel as well. However, both King Arthur and Queen Guinevere made much of Sir Lancelot, and believed at once that he was indeed the peerless knight of whom Merlin had spoken. But they did not know that another new knight, Mordred, the son of Queen Morgana le Fay, who also sat that day at the Round Table, was to be the traitor of Camlan at the still distant hour when the darkness should fall once more upon Logres. Now, although Lancelot seemed not to hear the unkind things which some of the knights who sat near Mordred were saying, he knew, none the less, and was sad. And so early the next morning he arose and called to him his cousin, Sir Lionel. "Make you ready, fair cousin," he said, "for this day we ride upon our first quest. Doubt it not that we shall find adventures full many ere we come again to Camelot." Away they rode into the forest fully armed, in and out of the early morning shadows, as fair knights as ever there were in the world. Higher and higher rose the sun, and hotter it grew, until Sir Lancelot grew so sleepy that at length he told Sir Lionel that he must stop and rest. "See," said Lionel presently, "yonder is a fair apple tree standing by a hedge. Under its shadow both we and our horses may find rest." "In good time," said Lancelot, "for truth to tell, I have not been so weary these 7 years." So they tied their horses to trees, and while Sir Lionel stood on guard against any attack by robbers, Lancelot laid himself down, with his helmet under his head for a pillow, and fell into a deep sleep. The day was very hot and still, and Lionel was nodding over his sword as he stood leaning on the hilt of it, when suddenly he heard the jingle of armor, and on the plain at a little distance he saw 3 knights riding their hardest, with one passing strong and mighty knight pursuing them. Anon, as he watched, the strong knight overtook one and then another of them, and in turn smote each down on to the cold earth. Then he dismounted, flung each knight across his own saddle, tied them there with the horse's reins, remounted his own horse, and rode away, driving the 3 horses with their shameful burdens before him. When Sir Lionel had seen this, he thought to himself, "Here may I win great honour." So without waking Lancelot, he sprang upon his horse and rode after them at full speed. Very soon he came up with the strong knight, and bade him turn and defend himself, or straightway release the 3 he had so shamefully bound. Then the strong knight turned round, set his spear in rest, and came against Lionel so fast that he flung both horse and man to the ground. Then he dismounted, tied his hands and feet, threw him over his own horse, just as he had served the 3 other knights, and rode on his way, driving them before him. Meanwhile at Camelot, Sir Hector de Marys missed his half-brother Lancelot and his cousin Lionel, and thinking that they must have set out in search of adventures, made himself ready also and rode into the forest. For a long way he rode without finding any trace of them, and at last, seeing an old forester, he stopped and said to him, "Fair fellow, know you of any place hereby to which knights seeking adventure might have turned?" "Yes, Sir Knight, indeed I do," answered the old man. "Scarcely a mile from here dwells Sir Turquin in a strong castle by a ford. Over that ford stands a great oak tree, and from its branches hang the shields of many good knights, whom he has overthrown and cast into a deep prison. Thereon also hangs a great basin of copper. Strike upon it with the handle of your spear, and Sir Turquin will come forth and do battle with you." "Gramercy," said Sir Hector politely. "Gramercy," said Sir Hector politely, and set spurs to his horse. Soon he came to the castle by the ford, and there, sure enough, hung a gay collection of shields on a great tree, and among them Sir Hector recognized that of his cousin Sir Lionel. Then, in a fury, he struck the copper basin until it boomed like a great bell, and turned to let his horse drink at the ford. "Come out of the water and joust with me," cried a loud voice behind Hector, and turning quickly, Sir Hector found a huge knight with spear already in rest, waiting for him. Out of the water he came in a great rage, and charged the knight so mightily that both horse and man spun round twice. "That was well done," roared Sir Turquin. "You hit me as a brave knight should, and such as you rejoice my heart exceedingly." And with that he charged Sir Hector, caught him under the right arm, lifted him clean out of the saddle on the point of his spear, and carried him away into his castle, where he threw him down on the floor. "I'll spare your life," said Sir Turquin, "for you joust mightily." Then he pulled off Sir Hector's armor, and flung him into the deep dungeon with the other knights. "Alas," said Sir Hector, sadly, when he found Lionel also a prisoner there, "how has this happened to you? And where is Sir Lancelot?" No one but he could save us, for none other is strong enough to fight and overcome Sir Turquin." "I left him sleeping under an apple tree," answered Lionel sadly. And there Sir Lancelot still lay, peacefully and comfortably asleep, without any idea of what had happened to his cousin and his brother. But when the noon was past, there came 4 queens riding on white mules, with 4 knights who held a green silk awning above them with a spear at each corner, so that the sun should not fall upon them too hotly. And as they rode thus, they heard a war-horse neigh, and looking saw it tethered to a bush, and beside it, under an apple tree, a sleeping knight armed completely except for his helmet. Quietly they rode near to look, and the knight was so fair that all 4 queens loved him at once. "Let us not quarrel over him," said one of them, who was Morgana le Fay, King Arthur's wicked sister. "I will cast an enchantment upon him so that he shall sleep without waking for 7 hours, and then we can have him carried to my castle, and when he wakes he shall choose one of us to be his love, or else die some dreadful death in my dungeons." So this enchantment was cast upon Sir Lancelot, and when he woke, it was to find himself lying in a cold stone cell where a fair damsel was setting supper for him. "How now, Sir Knight?" said she, when she saw that he was awake. "What cheer?" "But little," answered Lancelot, "for methinks I have been brought into a gloomy prison by some cruel enchantment." "Make now what cheer you may," said the damsel, "and I will tell you more tomorrow morning. There is no time now for words." And she went away quickly, sorrowing to herself that so fine a knight should be the victim of the wicked queen her mistress. Next morning early, Lancelot was brought before the 4 queens, and Morgana le Fay said to him, "Right well we know that you are Lancelot of the Lake, Sir Arthur's knight, whom Nimue, the Lady of the Lake, fostered in Avalon to be the best knight of Logris, and the noblest knight living. Right well we know that of ladies you serve Queen Guinevere alone. Yet now, in spite of fate, she shall lose you, and you her, or else your life. For living you go not from this castle unless you take one of us to be your lady and your love." "A hard choice indeed," said Lancelot, "to die or to choose one of you to be my love. Yet it is easily answered. I would rather die than shame my honour and my vows of knighthood. I will have none of you, for you are all false enchanters. As for Queen Guinevere, I will prove it in battle with any man alive that she is the truest lady to her lord of any living." "Then you refuse us?" asked Morgana le Fay. "Yes, by my life, I refuse the lot of you," cried Lancelot. The 4 queens went away threatening terrible things, and Lancelot was left to grieve alone in his cold dungeon and wonder what cruel death they may make him die. By and by he heard light footsteps down the stone stairs. The door opened gently, and there stood the damsel who had spoken to him on the previous night, carrying food and wine for him. She set these down on the stone table and asked him, as before, how he fared. "Truly, damsel," answered Lancelot, "never so ill as now." "Alas," sighed the damsel, "it grieves me much to see so noble a knight held thus cruelly and wickedly. Maybe I could find some help for you, for indeed I love not these queens whom I serve, nor do any oaths bind me to them." "Help me but to escape, fair damsel," exclaimed Lancelot eagerly, "and I will promise to repay you in any way that is not against my honour." "I would ask you then, sir, to do battle on Tuesday next for my father, King Bagdemagus, in a great tournament. For thereat many of King Arthur's knights shall fight, and at the last tournament 3 of them overcame him." "In truth, your father is a goodly knight," said Sir Lancelot, "and gladly will I do battle for him." "Then, sir," she went on, "I will lead you out of this castle early tomorrow morning, giving you your armour, shield and spear, and your horse. Ride then through the forest, and meet me at an abbey you will find not far distant, and there I will bring my father to you." "All this shall be done," said Sir Lancelot, "as I am a true knight." Before the sun was up, the damsel came to him again, and led him through 12 locked doors out of the castle. "Damsel, I shall not fail, by the grace of God," said Lancelot, and rode away into the morning, the white ground mist floating up nearly to his saddle, until he seemed almost to be gliding across the waters of the lake of Nimue, and was lost in the shadows of the forest. And the damsel sighed as she turned back into the castle, and there were tears in her eyes, for not many women could look upon Lancelot without loving him. Not many days later Sir Lancelot met the damsel and King Bagdemagus at the abbey, and on the Tuesday he rode to the tournament carrying a plain white shield with no coat of arms on it, so that no man might know who he was. And there he fought right nobly, and with one spear smote down Sir Mador, and Sir Mordred, and Sir Gahalatine, and spared their lives when they swore to come before King Arthur and at the next feast of Pentecost tell how they had been overthrown by the nameless knight. Then, without waiting for any thanks from King Bagdemagus, he rode into the forest once more and continued there many days, until on a sudden he was aware of a great knight riding a mighty horse, who jousted with Sir Gaheris, Gawain's brother, a knight of the Round Table. And the great knight smote Sir Gaheris to the ground, picked him up, threw him across his horse, and went on his way, driving the horse and the wounded knight in front of him. Sir Lancelot set spurs to his horse and rode after them, crying, "Turn, Sir Knight, put down that wounded man to rest a while, and let us try one another's strength in battle. For I hear it said that you have done great shame and despite to many knights of the Round Table. Therefore defend yourself." "Aha!" cried Sir Turquin, for it was he. "If you are a knight of the Round Table yourself, so much the better. I defy you and all your fellowship." "You have said enough for now," cried Lancelot. "This is the time for blows." Then they put their spears to rest, drew apart, and came together as fast as their horses could gallop, and they smote one another in the midst of their shields so hard that both their horses' backs broke at the shock, and the two knights were flung to the ground, where they lay stunned for a little while. After that they fought for more than 2 hours with their swords, neither having the vantage, though both were bleeding from many wounds. "You are the mightiest knight that ever I met," gasped Sir Turquin, as they stood resting on their swords. "I love a good fighter, and for love of you I'll set free all the knights in my dungeon, provided you are not that Lancelot who slew my brother Sir Carados of the Dolorous Tower. For him have I sworn to slay in revenge." "In that tower dwelt more evil than ever yet I have seen," said Lancelot, "and I slew Sir Carados, the craven, justly, whoever he was." "Ah!" cried Turquin, "then you are Lancelot. You are the most welcome knight of any. Now we rest not until one of us is dead." To it again they went, and the end was that Lancelot smote off Sir Turquin's head. "Come now," said Lancelot to Gaheris, and together these two wounded knights came to Turquin's castle, where hung the shields of Sir Hector and Sir Lionel, besides Sir Kay, Sir Marhaus, and many others of the Round Table. Then, while Lancelot washed his wounds at the ford, Gaheris went into the castle, flung down the porter, and with his keys unlocked the dungeon doors and set free the prisoners. Now, seeing that he was wounded, they all thought that he had fought and overcome Turquin. "Not so, noble sirs," said Gaheris. "It was Sir Lancelot of the Lake who set you free, for he fought and killed Sir Turquin, whom no one else could conquer. Now he bids you hasten to the court of King Arthur, and he will meet you there next year at Pentecost, if you would speak with him. But he prays Sir Lionel and Sir Hector to meet him on that day, when King Arthur next holds his high feast." "That we will do," said all the knights. "But we will ride now to seek him," said Lionel and Hector. "And I will ride with you," said Sir Kay. "I would ask his pardon for the ill things I spoke of him on the day when our Lord Arthur made him a knight." Meanwhile Sir Lancelot had washed his wounds at the ford and watered the horse which Gaheris had given to him, and, finding that the wounds were neither so deep nor so painful as he had thought, he did not come to the castle of Turquin, where the other knights were waiting for him, but rode on into the forest once more to seek for further adventures. On and on he went for many weeks after this, riding hither and thither in the forests which covered so much of Britain in those days, and many damsels he rescued from wicked men, many knights he fought with and overcame, even giants fell beneath his keen lance and the great sword wielded in his strong right hand. Of all the adventures which he met with at that time we cannot speak here, but one of the strangest befell him not long before his return to Camelot before the feast of Pentecost of the year after he had been made a knight. He rode into a deep forest, more lonely and wild than any he had yet traversed, and suddenly in the shadowy undergrowth he saw a white bracet casting about as if following a trail. But the trail was plain upon the ground, great dark slashes of blood. Then Lancelot rode faster and faster, following the bracet, who kept looking behind her to see that he was still there, Across a great marsh they went and came at length over a bridge to an old manor house, whose crumbling walls, half hidden by ivy, went down into a weed-grown moat. Into the great hall ran the bracet, and there Lancelot saw a knight lying dead, and the bracet went and licked his wounds and howled dolorously. And then there came out a lady, weeping and wringing her hands, and said to Lancelot, "Ah, to what sorrow have you brought me?" "Lady," he answered, "I did never harm this knight, for I but followed this bracet hither by the trail of blood. Therefore be not displeased with me." "Truly, sir," she answered, "I do not think it is you who has slain my husband, but he that did the deed lies sore wounded, of which wound he shall never be made whole. That I'll make certain." Then she fell to weeping and to cursing the knight who had slain her husband, Sir Gilbert, with many terrible words. "Now God send you better comfort," said Lancelot, and rode sadly away. He had not gone far, however, when he met a damsel who knew him by the device on his shield, and cried at once, "Well met, Sir Lancelot of the Lake, bravest of knights. I beg for your nobleness to help my brother, who is wounded sorely with a wound that will not cease from bleeding. This day he fought with one Sir Gilbert, and slew him in fair and open battle. But Sir Gilbert's lady is a wicked sorceress, and she brought it about by her magic that his wound shall never heal. But I met with the Lady Nimue wandering in the forest, and she told me that my brother's wound would close only if I could find a knight brave enough to go into the Chapel Perilous, and bring thence a sword and a piece of cloth from a wounded knight who lies there." "This is a marvellous thing," said Sir Lancelot. "But tell me who your brother is." "Sir," she answered, "he is Sir Meliot, a true knight of Logres." "Then I am the more sorry," said Lancelot, "for he is my fellow of the Round Table, and to aid him I will certainly do all in my power." Then she said, "Sir, follow this path, and it will bring you to the Chapel Perilous, and I shall remain here until you return. And if you do not return, then will there be no knight living who can achieve this adventure." Down the path went Lancelot, and came before long to a strange lonely chapel in a little clearing. Then he tied his horse to a tree, and went into the churchyard on foot. And on the end of the chapel he saw hanging many fair shields turned upside down. And suddenly 30 great knights dressed in black armor stood beneath the shields, taller by a foot and more than any mortal man, and they gnashed their teeth and glared horribly at Lancelot. Then, though he was much afraid, he drew his sword, put his shield before him, and charged into the midst of them. But they scattered on either side of him, without speaking a word or striking a blow. And he grew bolder, and entered into the chapel. The interior was lit only by one dim lamp which cast weird shadows beneath the low stone arches, and he was aware of a corpse stretched upon a stone slab and covered with a silk cloth. Stooping down reverently, Sir Lancelot cut a piece of the cloth away, and as he did so, the floor moved as if an earthquake had shaken the chapel, and the lamp swung, creaking dismally on its chain, until the shadows seemed to writhe and clutch at him. Sir Lancelot knelt a while in fear, and then he saw a fair sword lying beside the dead knight, and he took it quickly in his hand, and came into the churchyard once more, and then all the black knights spoke together in hollow tones, without moving their jaws. "Knight Sir Lancelot, lay by that sword, or else thou shalt die horribly." "Whether I live or die," cried Lancelot, "I'll not yield it up for mere words. Therefore fight for it, if you dare." But not a hand was raised against him, and he passed safely down the churchway path, and came to the lych gate. There a strange damsel stood waiting for him. "Sir Lancelot," she cried, "leave that sword behind you, or you will die for it." "I leave it not," he answered, "whatever may be threatened me." "You speak wisely," said the damsel, "for if you left that sword you would have come never again to the court of King Arthur." "Then I would be a fool to give it up," he answered. "But, gentle Sir Knight," said the damsel, "you must kiss me once ere you pass." "Nay, not so," answered Sir Lancelot. "That were a sinful kiss." "Alas," sobbed the damsel, "I have lost all my labour. Had you kissed me, you would have fallen to the earth a dead man, for I made this chapel perilous by magic, to entrap the 3 noblest knights of Logres, Sir Gawain, and you, and Sir Percival, who is not yet born. For I am Aluse, the sorceress, the champion of Morgana le Fay." "Now Jesu preserve me from your subtle crafts," said Sir Lancelot, crossing himself, and when he looked up, Aluse, the sorceress, had gone. Then Lancelot untied his horse and rode back swiftly along the path until he found the damsel, Sir Meliot's sister, and when she saw him she clapped her hands and wept for joy. Swiftly they went to the nearby castle where Sir Meliot lay, and they found him as pale as death, with the life-blood still flowing from his wound. Lancelot knelt down beside him, touched the wound with the sword, and bound it with the silk, and straightway Sir Meliot was made whole. After this, Lancelot abode with Sir Meliot and his sister, and rested in their castle for many days. But one morning he said, "Now I must set out for the court of King Arthur at Camelot, for the feast of Pentecost draws near. There, by the grace of God, you may find me if you wish." Then he rode away swiftly into the forest, the spring sunlight flashing back from his burnished armor as it fell like golden rain between the fresh green leaves. But he did not come to Camelot without meeting with more adventures on the way. Riding through pleasant country and open parkland as he drew nearer to Camelot, Lancelot chanced suddenly one day upon a lady who stood weeping beneath a great oak tree. "Oh, Lancelot, flower of knighthood," she cried, "help me now. Yonder in the tree-top is my lord's hawk, caught by the golden lunes tied about its feet. As I held it, it slipped from me, and my lord is a man of savage temper, and will surely slay me for losing the hawk." "Well, fair lady," said Lancelot, "since you know my name and require me by my vows of knighthood to help you, I will do what I can. But the tree is passing high, and there are many dead boughs upon it." Therewith he loosed him of his armor, the lady helping him, and, clad only in a shirt and breeches, he climbed into the tree and came at length to the hawk. Loosing it carefully, he tied the lunes to a rotten branch and threw it out from the tree, so that the hawk fluttered safely to the ground and was caught by the lady. Then Lancelot began to climb down again, but before he reached the ground, a great knight came striding out from a pavilion near by with a drawn sword in his hand. "Aha! Sir Lancelot," he cried, "now have I found you just as I would, and now will I slay you." "Ah, lady," said Lancelot, "why have you betrayed me?" "She did but as I told her," said the knight, "and this trap was laid for you by command of the Lady Aluse. Now, come down, and let me slay you." "It were evil shame to you," said Lancelot, "thus armed to slay a man who has neither armor nor weapons." "Such words will not save you," growled the knight. "At least give me my sword," said Lancelot, "that I may die with it in my hand." "Nay, I know better than to do that," laughed the knight. "No weapon shall you have if I can keep you from it." Then Sir Lancelot feared greatly that his hour had come, but nevertheless he would not let himself be slain tamely, nor would he attempt to leap out of the tree and run away, as he might have done without his armor. Presently, as he looked about him, he saw a thick, stumpy, dead branch. This he broke off, jumped down suddenly, dodged the knight for a moment, and then stood up to him bravely. The knight lashed eagerly at Lancelot with his sword, but he turned the blow with his wooden club, and then whirling it round, caught him such a bang on the side of the head that he cracked his skull. Then, seizing his sword, he cut his head off at a blow. "Alas!" cried the lady, "why have you slain my husband?" "It is no fault of mine," said Lancelot grimly. "You would between you have slain me by treason, and now your wickedness has turned on your own heads." Then he put on his armor and rode away, and a little before nightfall he came to a castle where he found fair entertainment and a comfortable bed for the night. But before morning he was roused by a knocking at the gate, and looking out of the window he saw Sir Kay, who had been chased there by 3 knights. "Truly," said Lancelot to himself, "I will go down and help Sir Kay, for those 3 knights will kill him otherwise." Then he put on his armor and let himself down through the window on the end of a sheet. "Turn!" he cried to the 3 knights as he rushed upon them, and in 7 strokes he had laid out all of them on the ground. "Sir Knight," they cried, "we yield ourselves to you as to a matchless fighter." "Yield to Sir Kay," said Lancelot, "or I will kill you as you lie." And when they had promised to do this, though grudgingly, for Kay was no fighter, he went on, "Go now swiftly to Camelot, and give yourselves to King Arthur at the feast of Pentecost, telling him that Sir Kay sent you." When they had gone, he brought Sir Kay into the castle and led him up to his bedroom. Then Kay recognized him by the light of his candle, and knelt to thank him for saving his life. "Nay," said Lancelot, "I did but my duty as a knight. Come now and rest, for you are wearied." So Kay ate and drank, and then fell sound asleep in Lancelot's bed. And when he woke late in the morning, Lancelot was gone, but so had Sir Kay's armour. "Aha!" laughed Kay. "Now there will be trouble for some of King Arthur's knights, for they will think it is I, and joust with him. But I myself will wear Lancelot's armour and ride in peace." For Sir Kay was not very popular among the knights of the Round Table, and some of the younger ones took their revenge for the cruel things he was in the habit of saying about them by knocking him off his horse whenever they met him riding in quest of adventures, which Kay did not do more often than he could help. This time he came back to Camelot without being challenged by a single knight, but Lancelot, wearing Kay's armour, but carrying his own spear, had a very brisk day of it. "There goes the proud Sir Kay," cried one of the 3 fresh knights who had pitched their pavilion not far from the castle where Lancelot had lodged. "He thinks that no knight is as good as he, however often we prove the contrary to him. But let us joust with him in turn. He will not be so saucy at the feast tomorrow if we bruise him well today." Lancelot, however, knocked them off their horses one after the other like so many 9-pins, and as they sat upon the ground staring at him in wonder, he commanded them to yield themselves to Queen Guinevere next day, and say that Sir Kay had sent them. Then he rode on again, and before long met his brother Sir Hector, with 3 of the best knights of the Round Table, Sir Segramore, and Sir Uwaine, and Sir Gawaine himself. "Now, by my faith," said Sir Segramore, "I will prove Sir Kay's might of which he speaks so often." So he set his spear in rest, and came against Lancelot, who did likewise. But Sir Lancelot smote Sir Segramore so sorely that horse and man rolled both on the ground. "Look, friends," exclaimed Sir Hector, "there was a mighty stroke indeed. Methinks that knight is much bigger than ever was Sir Kay. Now we shall see what I can do to him." So Sir Hector set his spear in rest, and he and Lancelot came together like a clap of thunder, and Lancelot knocked him over his horse's tail and left him lying on the plain. "By my faith," said Sir Gawaine, "yonder is a passing strong knight, and I am not sure that he has slain Sir Kay, and rides now in his armour. It will be hard to match him, but let us see what I can do." Together they came, galloping as if they were mad, but Lancelot sent Sir Uwaine flying out of his saddle, and he hit the ground so hard that he lay stunned for a long while. "Now I see well," said Sir Gawaine, "that I must encounter this knight." He raised his shield, took a good spear in his hand, and charged at Sir Lancelot with all his might, and each knight smote the other in the midst of his shield. But Sir Gawaine's spear broke all to pieces, while Lancelot struck him so hard that his horse could not keep its feet, but rolled over and over on the ground. And Lancelot rode on his way, smiling to himself and saying, "God give him joy that made this spear, for never came a better one into my hands." "I think that must be Sir Lancelot of the Lake," said Gawaine, rising slowly and helping the other knights to their feet. "Let us hasten to Camelot, for then we shall know." Next day at the feast of Pentecost all Arthur's knights were gathered together at the Round Table, and Sir Lancelot came in wearing Sir Kay's armour, but, of course, with no helmet. Then Gawaine, Uwaine, Hector, and Segramore knew for certain who it was that had overthrown them with one spear, and there was much laughing and joking among them. Then Sir Kay told the king how Sir Lancelot had rescued him from the 3 knights who would have slain him. "And he made the 3 knights yield to me instead of to him," said Sir Kay. And there they were, all 3 of them, to bear witness. "Sir Lancelot took my armour," Kay went on, "and left me his, and I rode home in peace, for no man dared joust with me." Then all those knights came in who had been held prisoner by Sir Turquin, and told how Lancelot had saved them. And Sir Gaheris said, "I saw all that battle from the beginning to the end, and that Turquin was the strongest knight that ever I saw." There came also Sir Meliot to tell how Lancelot had saved him, and King Bagdemagus, for whom he had fought, and many more, each with some story of mighty deeds and great daring. And King Arthur was happy to have such a knight in his court, and Queen Guinevere loved him, as she heard tell of all his mighty deeds. Nor did any blame Arthur now for knighting an untried squire, for Sir Lancelot had in that year of adventures won the greatest name of any knight in the world, and the most honoured of high and low. nor was there ever such another knight in the realm of Logres as Sir Lancelot of the Lake.